Hi, Rex here at RW Mods. Today we're going to look at this Blok 21BM engine. It's new. It came out June of 2020. I wish I had the head for it. It has a new color head and stuff. This one, it is used, is slightly used, and I was going to do some work on it. And he had the new head on his backup engine. This is the old head that the Bloks came with. The silver, and then they had like a screen print on there, and it wore off. You can see they had the blue and black writing on there, kind of signifying I believe the black was for a truggy, blue was for a buggy, and it didn't take long and that kind of wore off. So the new one is they call it a gray, but it's a really dark, almost looks like black with the engraving. It's etched in, so it's not going to wear off. Most engines have it etched in the head, so I think it's a similar head. It just has a different look. So we're gonna take a look at this engine. It's got some the head change. I believe this is new too. The basically the carb pull has a set screw on both sides. A little different look to it. This one does have it says it's a 21J carb. It doesn't have the it's not engraved in there, but it is the 21J carb, which is kind of the standard, one of the best carbs OS makes. This engine, they say it's good for a truggy or buggy. It retails at $469.99. They say that the parts are interchangeable with the 21AP. That's the black, the black, the silver head with the black writing. This engine comes with a 6 and a 6.5 restrictor. Like I said, it comes with a 21J carb, and these also come with an oil bath break-in. So these are partially broken when you buy them. All of them are. You can't. I don't think it's an option to get it without it. So it's got the oil bath break-in. They say to heat cycle it a few times, but your break-in is mostly done. So I got this engine I have the screws out of it. I didn't have the correct head for it anyway, so I didn't put the other one on. And so we'll take a look at this. So initially, this engine it's kind of based off the OS 21XZ, XCB. Sorry. I think someone said there was some block changes to this. I don't know if they're internal. I don't really see, a major noticeable difference to the block. Take the carb off too. This engine does have a steel rear bearing, which is fine. I'm fine with a steel bearing. Usually when I do the first rebuild, or 3-4 gallons in, whenever I have it apart again, I'll just throw a ceramic in there. Crank is a DLC coated crank with one tungsten slug in it. It's filled. It's kind of their standard crank that they've had for quite a while. Some come with the weight, some without. The piston, pretty much what they've had out for quite a few years. This dimple on the rod signifies that this is a 29.5 millimeter center to center. OS used to have, everything was 30 millimeters. And then when they started with the shorter stroke engines, the B2101 and stuff, they went to the shorter rod, a half millimeter shorter rod, and they've kind of kept it on some and some not. But if you're rebuilding an OS engine, see, this engine to me kind of looks a lot like the Spec 2, the Speed Spec 2, and the Spec 2 I believe had the 30 millimeter rod. So if you're messing with OS and you're trying to find a rod and stuff, make sure that you know the center to center distance. Now you can make it work if you know what you're doing. You can make it. I could put a 30 millimeter rod in this engine, but I would have to shim up the sleeve a half a millimeter. So it is, there is a way to get around things, but just make sure that especially if you went to a longer rod, you would have some trouble. It would probably hit the head. The piston would. And the sleeve is a pretty standard 3-port, pretty similar to the design that they've had for a few years. Like I said, this engine's used. Head button. P3 plug is pretty standard on these. I'd say a P3 or P4 plug that you should use in this. Block says it's a 21J carb, which is pretty nice. Probably the nicest tuning carb. There was some, I did hear some people talking about the, I know I've seen it on maybe the B2102. Some of the newer shorter stroke engines had a smaller diameter through hole in them, and I think that was kind of for mileage and stuff. But I also heard some people say that they didn't tune well, but I have no personal experience with it. I do with this carb, and it does tune nice. So overall, it looks like a great engine. I've heard the performance is pretty good on it. I guess we didn't look at the backplate. This pretty standard looking backplate. One thing I wish OS had a little tighter fit on their backplates, the O-ring. This one's not too bad right when it's new, but there's over time and some they don't have a whole lot of resistance there. So that's pretty easy to fix. All they would have to do is just go a couple thousandths less deep on that O-ring groove. But and talking about, I was talking about the short stroke engines. This is basically a standard long stroke, the 16.3 or 16.28. This one's actually, Novorossi uses 16.28. This is like a 16.3, but the standard long stroke. So it's a 16.3 bore, and I feel it's one of the best strokes. You get a little bit different power band out of the shorter stroke. I think the shorter stroke engines are a little more for buggy. This one should pull a truggy really well too. And we'll go through the numbers on this Block 21BM. We got for blowdown we have 41, and induction open 149, induction closed 64 for 214. No, I'm not really bad in math. That's kind of what the computer program kicks out. It could be 149 and a half and 64 and a half or whatever, so it ends up 214. And these are the Spec 2 numbers that I've had. Yeah, it's been a while since I had one apart, but the blowdown was a little higher on the Spec 2, a little more induction opening, and slightly induction closing, so for a total of 3 degrees more induction, which you probably wouldn't really notice a huge difference there. You would notice a difference on the blowdown. This thing's not going to have quite as much top end as the Spec 2, but a little more grunt on the bottom end. So for a truggy, it's probably really good engine. Some mods, if you didn't like it in the buggy, you could do some things, maybe You know, it suggests a 2090 pipe, but 2090s are pretty aggressive. This engine with a 2090 pipe is going to be pretty aggressive in a buggy. If if you have a pretty tacky track, but in a slippery condition, you might want to go to a steel flywheel, maybe try a different pipe, or you could have it modified and kind of raise that blow down a little bit, or there's some things you could do. So the $470 price tag, that's on the higher end. One consideration is it is oil bath break in for you, so that's going to save you, if you like to have that done. That'll save you $50 is what a lot of people charge for that. So you're talking 420. That's still a lot of money to pay for an engine, but the OS quality is pretty good. This DLC crank, it's going to last unless you run dirt through it. It's not going to wear. So you throw a rod and bearings in it every few gallons, you can get a lot of life out of as long as you take care of it. Don't get it too awful hot and run dirt through it. It'll last a long time, quite a few rebuilds. This sleeve does have this groove in here. Normally that will kind of indicate that there's something different. Don't if you're swapping out parts and stuff. I did notice that the compression height, your piston compression height from the piston to the top of the sleeve was a little bit different than the Spec 2, and it also it had a little more compression. I was thinking it was around 20 thousandths piston to head clearance, which to me, I mean, this is a pretty small chamber on this head too. They used to have a little bit bigger chamber. So if it was me and I was going to run this engine, I would probably add a 4 thousandths shim. I think it'll just be more calm and tune, and maybe not run on at the end of the straightaway or idle up when you come in the pits. Run a little cooler, a little more top end. I personally like a little bit more piston head clearance than what this had. One thing on the carb too, it does look like they changed the material on the carb insulator. I believe this is a similar carb. They had that kind of clearish on it before, and it kind of flaked. Hopefully this stuff doesn't do that. This stuff, sometimes you take out these OS carbs and they stick in there, and then sometimes the insulator stays in the block, and they're kind of a pain a little bit. So this is a better design, and they used to have a little shim that would go down in there that you would lose when you take them apart, and then this kind of looks like it kind of goes a little past the carb body and kind of takes that shim up, so you don't have to have that. So that's a plus. If this should be a little bit, it almost feels like a Delrin. That should be better too. Same carb with just some improvements, which is good. One thing on the OS, I'm a fan of OS engines. I'm not a fan of the price. If I'm racing, and I'm really serious, and I want to spend the money, that's what I would go with. To me, there was a couple improvements I would like to see them make. I think this carburetor is probably the best tuning carburetor out of all the engines, all the brand engines. I really like that carb, and it does tune well. One thing I wish OS would improve a little bit is the piston material. You get these over like 260, 270 degrees. You miss the tune a little bit, and you're trying to finish the race, and you get it overly hot. It will noticeably lose its pinch, which is not a deal breaker, because guys like me pinch engines. We pinch the sleeve, and then it's back running again for what I charge $15. So that's not a huge thing. So $15, you got it overly hot, you're out $15 in a little time to take it apart. That's not a huge deal. Like I said, the O-ring, I wish that groove was a little bit, not quite that deep, so it would seal a little bit better. There's a couple of things, but all in all, you get these engines, take care of them, like I said, with a DLC coated crank, put a new rod and bearings in it once in a while, repinch it. You're good to go for 20 gallons if you take care of it. So that is one of the benefits with the DLC coated crank and stuff. So I think that's it for this engine. Thanks for watching, and have a good night.